So I'm going to cast Curiosity, targeting Niv Mizzet. Resolves. Then I'll cast Brainstorm. Niv Mizzet triggers. Any responses?
This reminds me so much of 2020.
Do you have a response, Walt?
Yeah, I just gave it.
No, do you have any cards in your hand to respond with?
Oh, no. Just like 2020.
All right, good game. Yeah, I did play a lot of Niv in 2020.
No, it's not that.
Well, the infinite combo. I don't actually play many of them in my decks anymore, except for the twinning stuff thing in Savine that was caught on stream the other night. I do need to cut that.
No, it's not the infinite. No.
Playing Is It reminds you of 2020?
No.
Brainstorm?
No.
Then what is it about this that reminds you of 2020?
2020. COVID, James. You make me sick!
Oh, man. I'm actually now reminiscing about the really, really early days of Commander and the one rule that we got incredibly wrong.
Oh, Commander damage.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
We used to think this is like showing clearly we are learning Commander just at the same pace as everybody else. We used to think that any damage that your Commander dealt was considered Commander damage.
Notably, of course, Niv Mizzet, every time it triggers, could deal damage to a player. And so we thought fully that once James resolved Niv Mizzet, if he could draw 21 cards, he could kill a player.
Which, with a card like Windfall, is totally possible. But,
and then we also just didn't run flying blocks or targeted removal. So it was just like Niv dealing 5 to you a turn, then 1 in your draw step, couple more from casting spells. It was like, wow, I've got a 2-turn clock to kill James, or he kills me.
If you're a new listener, we've learned a lot more than that. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast, where discarded tires are a vast, untapped resource. I'm your host, Walt.
Like for garden beds kind of thing?
Anything. Anything's possible with a tire.
Hello, Commander players. I am him, James. I'm him.
Nice and simple.
Him.
Yeah.
Himothy.
Yeah. Himbo?
Yeah. There you go. That actually fits my vibe.
Look, before we get to the transmission, we did want to give you a last reminder of our giveaway that we're currently running. So just to run through again, I know you've heard it if you've listened to the last couple of episodes, but we have a complete set of the Allied Talisman's Secret Lair by Dan Frazier. Very cool. We've cracked that open. That's in a couple of our decks already.
Yes, yeah. They look like really, really unique. They've got that old border frame.
Yeah.
Super really nice art.
Traditional oil canvas, just really juicy, nice old school style
Dan Fraser,
art.
man.
Yeah, so cool. We have the new Fallout pre-constructed deck Science, as played by James on stream. Very cool.
Wishing I played Liberty Prime as the commander now, but
You saw Kyle Hill play it on game nights, right? Yeah. It looked really sweet with that at the helm.
I think the deck is a lot more oppressive if it uses that. But, that's just my tip. You can use the Dr. Madison Lee if you want. But my tip is
also still very cool.
It was really fun deck to play.
Definitely. We have a Murders at Carl of Mana collector booster for you. And thanks to Palms Off Gaming, a Black Genesis deck box, a set of black blackout sleeves, a set of inner sleeves, and a turquoise 4-pocket binder. All of that will be going to the winner of the giveaway, and all you have to do to enter the giveaway is fill out a poll that we have linked in the show notes.
Yeah, it's really important for us to make sure we're making the content that is right for our audience, and you are our audience person. I'm in your ear right now, or in your car speakers right now. There is a little tiny James talking to you.
Yep, that's how we do it.
We genuinely really do want to know what you're liking, what you're not liking about the show, because we want to make improvements, and we've not spoken to you guys properly like this in a while, so it'll take you about 10 minutes to fill out. We want to hear as much as you can, and there's a little section at the end that if you have any questions for Walt and I, the Space Commanders have allowed us to take some audience questions.
We'll be sending them to the Space Commanders for approval, but they will be going in an upcoming Q&A episode, we've been assured by the Space Commanders. So very cool. But yeah, this is your last opportunity to enter. We'll be drawing a winner on the 29th of March, so a week from today, if you're listening to this episode when it comes out, and we'll be announcing the winner via our socials. So you'll want to follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Get Commanded on either of those, and that's where we'll be announcing it 1 week. So make sure you enter now while you have the chance.
For sure.
But we do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
The tale of the beginning of your transmissions illustrates the importance of choosing collaborators wisely, continuously improving, and spending money carefully.
That's not a very Magic the Gathering themed question.
I think this, they want us to talk about when they first got in touch with us, I guess. The origins of Get Commanded. Look, we know some of you have been around for a long, long time and will be familiar with this story. But there's probably parts of it that you don't know.
Yeah, we've kind of spread it across multiple episodes, and we have actually received a couple of people just asking questions about how we got started and all this kind of stuff. And also asking for kind of advice on content creation.
Yeah.
Which is kind of wild because Walt and I are still asking other people for advice on content creation.
But we know a few things,
We've been doing it for a while now.
It's been almost 2 years, actually. Yeah. When this episode comes out, it will be, in April, it'll be 2 years since we started. So,
happy 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. It's been a long time. But it's been like, it's also gone by really quickly.
Yeah, I feel like there's moments where I've blinked and COVID happened 4 years ago now.
Yeah. Look, COVID just bent time completely. Yeah. And all of it has blended into one.
2021, 2022, and 2020. Like that 3-year period are like one blob.
One big year. Yeah. One very long, very tiring year.
So where should we start this whole story? Because I feel like it should probably start because you played Magic as a kid. Like, you were playing Magic as a child.
So, for a long, long time, I was playing Magic when I was 6 years old.
But it was kitchen table. Like, you weren't going to a local game store.
Never went to a game store. Never played Standard. Bought a couple of pre-constructed decks. I think I had a 7th edition deck and an Odyssey deck. I remember, like a starter sort of deck. But yeah, I certainly never played any draft or any standard or, I believe it or not, didn't have the money at 6 to play vintage. Shocking.
Probably would have been cheaper to enter at that point, actually.
True.
You should have got in on the ground
floor. You idiot, Walt.
Buy all your Black Lotuses.
The investment you could have made. Clearly a missed opportunity.
For 6-year-old Walt.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
But look, I think the origins of Get Commanded as a unified thing kind of start. Well, I'm going to say 2019, which is when you started playing Magic.
Yeah, so I started playing Magic. I think I started playing maybe at the end of 2018, but really got into the local game store scene in 2019. I was a huge D&D nerd, and I was basically buying as many D&D books and minis and dice that I could possibly buy.
Yep.
And in Greensboro, which is pretty close to where I was living at the time, a new game store popped up just at the end of 2018, and I was going in there basically to buy D&D books. And one night I went in and just so happened to go in on a Magic night, and I have seen people play this game for years.
Yep.
And in high school, a lot of my friends play Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep.
I was I could play Yu-Gi-Oh, but not very well. And I was always I think this would be a game that I'd be really good at.
Yeah.
So I went up to one of the LGS guys, still a shout out to Callum, who still plays in our community. He was working at the store at the time.
Doesn't work there anymore, but still plays at our store. Yeah.
And I went up to Callum and I was like, hey, what's the deal with this Magic the Gathering thing? And he handed me those starter decks.
Yeah.
And cute story. I was like, how much do I owe you for these? And he was like, no, these are free, man. And I never realized that that's what they refer to as a gateway drug. They give you a little free
These
sample.
ones are free.
Yeah, these ones are free.
Later, we'll take your money.
Your liver as well, your soul.
What was the standard set at the time?
Well, I was like really interested in War of the Spark. War of the Spark and like that arc of like the Planeswalker Liliana rebelling against Bolas and all that kind of stuff. That was just completing. So I got really, really interested in the story of War of the Spark.
Okay.
Did a little bit of digging and like going through all of that. And then when War of the Spark came out like mid 2019, I remember going to the like draft for War of the Spark.
Yep. So you drafted War of the Spark. Cool.
I did draft Lore of the Spark. War of the Spark.
Lord of the Spark.
Yeah, which is Nicobolus.
The one spark to rule them all and in the darkness bind them.
That's effectively the story. He wanted to get all of them.
Low key, yeah.
But yeah, I did that draft, and then I went, I just played Kitchen Table with my partner at the time.
Yeah.
And then Throne of Eldraine came out, and this was like the key set for me because
of Brawl, right?
Yes,
yeah, the
exactly
Brawl decks
right.
came out. So this was for those of you who
missed this period of Magic.
Or like the 99.6% of us who don't play Brawl. Sorry, Wizards of the Coast. It was never going to happen. No, it's the Mean Girls meme. Stop trying to make Brawl happen. It's not going to happen.
Or at least make Arena a 4-player client.
Yes,
Come on.
any of those would be good.
Yeah.
Anyway, they tried to make Commander but standard, basically. So it was a 60-card deck. Was it still Singleton?
It was still Singleton, but you had a commander.
You had a commander. Otherwise, it worked exactly like the command zone. It had a command attacks and everything, but it was 1v1, and it was called Brawl, basically.
Yeah, and they printed Arcane Signet.
Yes, that's the origin of Arcane Signet. I keep forgetting. And so Eldraine was the set they did this for. So all those legends from Eldraine that we really like still. I've got a Cirque Wind deck, for instance.
Yep.
Cullen, Teller of Tales, comes back from there. Even
Corvold, Fakehouse King.
the OG Corvold. Yep. Yeah, so all of those were the commanders of the Brawl precons, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and they had at the local game store a like tournament with the Brawl decks.
Okay.
And they were doing it as you could either play a 4-player pod or a 2-player pod.
Oh, cool.
And at the time, this was, I think, Throne of Eldraine. I did just Google it as we started this episode.
Sure.
Throne of Eldraine came out in October. So I imagine this was like, right then or a little bit afterwards leading into the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And I played in that. That was my first ever tournament. Fun little way to like track my progress and stuff in a local game store. And I did really well. And I really enjoyed the 4-player experience. And a couple of friends or people at the game store, they weren't really close to me at the time, said, if you really like this Singleton way of playing Magic with a commander, the whole format of Commander is like just this, but like without the competition.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, show me. So the first Commander deck I ever played was Galta. It was a mono green stompy dinosaur deck
that someone had built, obviously, at the store.
It was actually one of our patrons, Wizard Down Under's deck.
Oh, no way!
Yeah.
What a cool throwback.
So super cool throwback for me and Wizard. But like, yeah, we played a couple of games, and then this tiny little thing called COVID came around early in 2020.
Well, there's one crucial thing that happens just before COVID and the lockdown start.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Which is the true origins of Get Commanded now. So not James, not Walt. The origins of Get Commanded.
This is Walt and James meeting.
Yes, which
intersect.
is that James's partner at the time was looking for a house and moved in with me and Abe, who some of you now would be familiar with from the Fallout stream.
Yep.
He played with us. He's been part of our playgroup ever since then. Moved in.
And I remember coming to like the house inspection.
The first time. So you walked in the door and literally directly in front of the door there was a bookshelf. It was my bookshelf. And on there were some D&D books.
Yep.
And there was my old iPad box. with like cardboard dividers gaffer taped into it.
Also, like the cards were like wrapped in rubber bands.
So basically, at this time in my history, so we've cut a big chunk of it out. We've gone from 6 years old to 24 or something. Me and my brother would still buy packs every now and then for Christmas and birthdays and stuff. Mm-hmm. We'd still play with each other. But the way we'd play with each other is we had every single green card we owned in a deck, every single red card, blue card, black card. There was 5 monocolored decks that were like, this is why I'm so good at shuffling 100 cards. There was about 90 cards in each of these decks, maybe more.
Brilliant.
And we would just play them. We just like threw enough lands in there that they were functional barely. and we would just play. You'd be like, oh, I feel like playing white today. And you'd be like, okay, I'm going to play blue. And we'd just like play white versus blue with like we'd be playing like Chasm Skulker from Core Set 2015, but also like Alabaster Potion from 4th edition. It's like X white, gain X life.
Yeah, we're on the same level here.
Yeah.
But like genuinely, when I walked in and saw that, I was like, okay, my partner at the time, this is going to be a good house.
Yes.
I trust these guys. You're going to be fine here. And yeah, my partner moved in, and then like lockdown happened.
Yeah.
And
you moved in.
I moved in as well. And granted, it was like a bit of a snap decision, because it was like, okay, we either have to choose where, because like lockdown in Melbourne, if you weren't in Melbourne listening from America or something like that, lockdown in Melbourne was serious.
It was very strict. Yeah.
We had like a 5-kilometer radius that we were really allowed to go.
You couldn't really talk. You couldn't see anyone outside of your immediate household.
Yeah.
Was the main rule that was really strictly enforced. And so for a lot of people, it became really important who was in your immediate household.
Yeah.
Later on in COVID, this wasn't a thing at the time because everything was so immediate. Later on, they ended up relaxing the rules around intimate partners. There was rules around intimate partners that basically made them exempt from everything else that you did, but that you could have one intimate partner that you could see frequently.
But at the time, it was like, where do you want to live? Because
Yeah,
that's who
like
you're going to see for an
Yeah.
indeterminate amount of time.
And if you had a close partner at the time, it was like, okay, either you're going to live with them or when are you going to see them? Like, you'll give them a call.
Yeah, FaceTime.
You'll FaceTime them.
Zoom.
That's basically your only option. So yeah, James, understandably at the time, was like, okay, I'll just move in with you guys. We were all totally fine with it. It was a pretty big house. And we knew, like, you know, you were going
It
to...
was a pretty big house, but it was one bathroom.
Yeah, look, it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy.
But it was manageable.
We got through it. And like...
But the thing was, I guess the really important thing for Get Commanded is there was 4 Commander players in the house now at this point, right? There was me, Abe, James, and James's partner at the time. I didn't own a Commander deck at the time. I don't think... Abe did either.
I didn't really either. I had a Brawl deck, but I remember the earliest forms of 4-player Magic we played.
Yeah.
We just played with 60-card decks and just sat around a kitchen table swinging at each other.
Yeah.
That was how we played. And then I said, okay, maybe we should actually build a Commander deck. So we actually play, because we were playing a Wild West format of like just any cards go. It was like this random, James is playing a deck built entirely from Theros Beyond Death that just came out, but Walt's playing with Odyssey. Like, it's,
it was such a mess. I literally, like, I remember we were trying to find, because when we decided, okay, we're gonna play Commander now.
Yep.
It was like, I was like, okay, well, I should probably pick like a couple of my favorite colors and probably like some of my favorite cards, and then I'll just like try and find a commander that could fit some of my favorite cards into. So at the time, my favorite cards to play with were Chasm Skulker.
Still a great card.
Whenever you draw a card, you put a counter on it. When it dies, you make that many island walking 1/1 squids. And Ajani's Pridemate that says whenever you gain life, put a +1 counter on it.
Yep.
So I found online, I was looking at EDH rec, and I was like, is there any legendary creature that cares about these two
Life
things?
gaining card draw.
And there was a Zor the Lawbringer that has like a bunch of other text on him, but says when he attacks, you can pay X white, blue, I think it is. Yeah, that sounds right.
Sphinx's Revelation.
Sphinx's Revelation mana. You draw X cards, gain X life. And I was like, oh my god, if I have Chasm Skulker and Ajani's Pridemate, it'll trigger them both. So for a long time, I had a backwards magic card, and I was like, guys, this is a Zor the Lawbringer. And I'd put my phone over the card and be like, this is what the card does, guys, because I didn't even own it at the time.
But then it became like, okay, let's buy cards. And we started ordering singles. We cracked packs together. We did some limited events at home.
We did a draft. We had a booster box of Ikoria, I think, and we did like an actual it was a 4-player draft.
Yeah. Like you had a huge card pool, but it was fun.
It was really fun.
It was fun. And then we had like Jumpstart came out while we were living it together.
We had a little Jumpstart
We did a Jumpstart competition.
But yeah, mostly we were just brewing a bunch of Commander decks because there was nothing else to do. And we were placing very large singles orders so we could get all the cards we needed for each of the decks that we just brewed. Sometimes we were buying like each of us multiple decks at a time.
Yeah, I remember there was like one where I was like, okay, I'm buying the Yuriko deck and a Scarab God deck and some other cards for other decks. It was like,
I think I placed an order where I bought like all the cards for Krufix God of Horizons and Kaikar wins fury.
We were spending like hours putting in the card order alone.
Yeah.
Like,
we were watching every game nights when it came out. Like, we were like just so obsessed with specifically just Commander.
I mean, to be honest, what else could we do in COVID?
Yeah.
Like,
everyone had an obsession and yeah, ours was Commander.
And I guess we now need to move out of COVID because this is like once we didn't think about making content while we were in lockdown together because we were so novice. We were, really researching as much as we could. So we didn't feel like we had a leg to stand on to give advice. But after COVID, we really were like, okay, well, now that we have access to an LGS again, we need to engage in an LGS. So we really were like desperate to get in, to get a play group going, get a Commander night up and running.
Yep.
And when we started, like, all the restrictions started lifting, more people came in.
Yep.
Basically what happened is our Commander night blew up. We found out that pretty much everyone had a very similar experience in Melbourne that we did and started playing Commander together.
Yeah.
So when we saw there was like, 40 people coming to a Commander night, I took it upon myself really to go, I need organization here. And I think that there needs to be a structure around this. It's the Wild West at the moment.
There's enough like hype here to justify something like more organized, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it was also a bit, again, Wild West. It was, there was a group chat where there were like 14-year-old kids in. Oh,
God. And then like very, very inappropriate memes being shared all the time.
Unsavory. But
yeah. And the power levels were wildly different as well. You'd sit down in the game and someone would blow up all the lands and you'd be like, okay. I didn't realize that's what we were doing today. But
like we had, a drive to make this more of a fixture in the game store, more of a thing. So for context, I have a lot of experience with like university clubs and societies. So I used to run a snow sports team at my uni. I'm very involved with how the admin stuff for that works. So I basically sat down, wrote a constitution. It was like a 6-7 page constitution with definitions and a legal structure, and we got it accredited as a non-for-profit organization. And then we needed basically volunteers. A couple of people were like, we need some volunteers to help out on this committee, and Walt joined.
Yeah, so the initial committee was 10. So I think there was 5 of you on the executive committee, and then there were 5 general committee members. So yeah, I joined a little bit later as a general committee member. But yeah, from there it really took off. Like the Discord server that we still talk about all the time and like link to, and where Thrifty Thursdays comes out, that's the same server that was basically built during that time.
There's
a Facebook group that has a large number of people still in it that is quite active. That's from then as well. Yeah, the Constitution, as you say, this is when I started writing Thrifty Thursdays.
Yeah, you wrote it for this community.
Yeah, I was so hyped by this like gathering of people that was happening. I was like, I want to produce stuff that like people will engage in and like. We've mentioned some of the events we've run before.
Like we did a Chris Kringle event where you had to build a Commander deck for your Chris Kringle. Is that what they referred to?
They were referred to as your
Chuck Chuck. That was it.
Chuck Chuck was the name of the event. It was Commander. I was such a
Commander
dickhead.
Community Chris Kringle.
No.
I can't remember now.
It should have been Commander Community Chris Kringle, but instead it was Commander Chris Community Kringle.
Oh, CK,
because I wanted to call it Chuck Chuck. I don't know why.
You're weird.
I'm a strange guy.
But it was a great event. And we used to do like these kind of things all the time. The community was like just thriving. And we went from like 40 players to like nearly 300 now.
Yeah.
Like it was a big
really,
boom.
Really booming. People were really interested in stuff. And yeah, like as a creative person who had been very stifled during most of COVID, I obviously had done a degree at uni in theatre. Didn't get any opportunities to act throughout all of lockdown.
No, believe it or not.
And Thrifty Thursdays were basically my way of getting some of that out. But I just wanted to do slightly more in the community in this way. So I thought, I'm going to start a podcast. Now, this is not the origin of Get Commanded. We still haven't gotten there yet. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so at the time, I was very busy on running events and doing brand work and getting deals with like sponsors for the community and stuff like that. But what was like content?
Yeah, I want to make some content. So I started, and they're still up there somewhere. I don't recommend them. But I started a podcast called Know Thine Enemy. Yeah. So basically, at this point, we were actually back into lockdown. So we had this whole community group set up. There was interest in maintaining it and like preparing for when we opened back up. But we were in lockdown. Yeah,
it was like on and off at this period. Like, you know, we'd be like out walking on the street in masks with anyone we wanted to. And then all of a sudden, we'd get an announcement that'd be like, by 11:59 tonight, you are not to leave your house for another 2 weeks.
Or you can go to the store and you can play, but the tables have to be twice as big, and you have to be at least 1.5 meters away from everybody. And you'd be like, "Hey, Callum, what have you got over there?" It was an interesting time. Anyway, I was like, I want to start a podcast. So I started this thing called Know Thine Enemy. Basically, I was still considering myself very new to Magic, very new to Commander. Didn't feel like I had a wealth of knowledge to share, but I felt there were these really established players in the community already.
Well, there were people that have been playing for like 10, 15 years in our community. Yeah,
very experienced, like not professional, but like tournament winning
some
players.
Some of them are.
In the community, and I was like, look, these people all have particular ways they approach Commander and play the game itself. I kind of want to like dive into what it is that they know. And so I thought the conceit of the podcast was, they're my enemies. I gotta interview the people who beat me all the time to work out why they keep beating me, and that was kind of the gag or whatever.
It was a good premise. It was
a good premise. And look, I think the first, because I know we're probably going to give some tips on content creation here. I think the first tip I want to give.
Oh, we're finally at providing advice. Fantastic. 25 minutes in and we're there.
Start with an audience. And your audience can be anybody. So I was really lucky in this case to have literally a community of Magic the Gathering players. I could not be any better of a starting audience than that. But like, if you're going to stream on Twitch, if you're going to upload stuff on YouTube, just send it to your friends and your family. Like, just be like to your partner or your dad or your mum or whatever, and be like, "Hey, I'm going to stream on Twitch at this time. Can you just open the stream and every now and then just write a comment? You know, like tell me what you think or something." It's just a lot easier to start with, even 4 people or 5 people, than 0. 0 is a really hard number to start with.
And it allows like a kind of pathway for others to join. They're like, this is a community that already exists.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable joining this community because it's already established.
In a Twitch chat, it's a lot less intimidating to talk to someone when you can see someone else in the chat than an empty chat and being like, if I start talking now, I'm the only one talking to the streamer. They're going to talk to me. They're going to ask me stuff. I've got to answer. Like there's pressure there. Whereas if there's a bunch of people chiming in and saying stuff, it's quite easy to throw a comment in there because it's like, it's low key, you know?
But yeah, and like we're not saying, obviously, we're in a very different situation with having like a full community club type thing.
Yeah.
But, if you're specifically wanting to make content around Magic the Gathering, you probably play at a local game store.
Yeah, or at least in a play group.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, like, just talk to that play group and be like, hey, if I started a podcast, would you guys listen to it?
Yeah.
Like, or share it. Like, just post it on your story and be like, hey, check out Jim. He's great.
Yeah. Or there's even, there's plenty of podcasts out there that are, hosted by one person regularly, and they clearly have, a play group of people that they bring on. I mean, this is basically where Command Zone have ended up, right?
Yeah.
For a long time, it was just Josh and Jimmy, but they have a very large rotating cast now of people who can host that podcast that's basically their play group, you know, the Command Zone play group. So it's a thing. And look, TikTok and Reddit are free as well. You can post on there and people will hear about it. That said, the problem with KTI, Know Thine Enemy, the episode quality varied quite a lot depending on who I interviewed. No shade whatsoever, but people have different levels of skill. And I also just had different amounts that I got along with the guest. There were guests that I got along, we had Cooper on, Know Thine Enemy, and Cooper actually ended up coming onto this podcast.
Yes,
episode
he's our
15
only ever guest on this
at this
podcast.
Point, he's the only one for the Burnout episode. But Cooper and me had great banter. That episode was quite long.
Yep.
We talked a lot about lore. That was really fun.
I enjoyed listening to that one.
Yeah, but there were other guests that I had on who I just did not have that same synergy with, and
also synergy, nice one. You didn't combo with.
No,
no,
I wasn't Niv Mizzet and Curiosity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whereas when we're putting in a room together, boom, fireworks.
Niv Mizzet, Curiosity. Yeah.
I like that. That works quite well. Walt pointed at me for Niv and him for Curiosity.
I see it.
Yeah,
I see it.
But I think that it's the chemistry between guests and stuff, and some people just aren't equipped to sit in front of a microphone and be entertaining. I know it sounds weird, but anyone can talk in front of a microphone as long as you're not mute effectively.
Yeah.
But it's what you do behind it. It's a weird thing to explain, and I think that I guess this is where I come in, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I guess the other reason you come in is that because of the essential problem of the podcast that Know Thine Enemy, I was always in this lower position, right? It was you know more than me and I'm asking questions.
You're the novice.
Yeah. And the problem that I ran into was Some of the advice was really good. Some of it was not. Even in my very early days of knowing about stuff about magic, I was like, I don't feel comfortable endorsing this message. Like, this does not feel like something I agree with.
You only need to run 2 pieces of ramp. Sorry, what?
Someone was like, the deck works so well that I just thought, I'll just play 45 lands. And I was like, don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Look, I didn't feel like I had an opportunity to throw my thoughts in because of this setup.
The whole point was that you were learning, right?
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, what if, scratch this whole idea. Start from scratch. What if it was more of a mutual thing? We're just chatting on the mic and there's something that we're just collectively working towards. And I was like, who could I sit down with and just chat, and it would be fun to just sit down and chat with. And to be honest, I had you lined up as a guest on Know Thine Enemy, from the get-go. Yeah.
What was the because every guest that you had on that podcast was like, you either were a great expert in law or...
You were politics.
I was politics.
You were going to be my politics expert and teach us all about politics, which you ended up getting to do on Get Commanded,
We've covered on Get Commanded now, so we've kind of done that.
But yeah, look, I literally just messaged James and Wim and was like, hey, this Know Thine Enemy thing, I'm kind of exhausted with it. I don't feel like I got the energy to do it. Do you want to just have a crack at me and you hosting something? I'll throw a script together, come over, we'll just record something, and we'll just see what we think of it.
Yeah, and at the time, I do want to clarify as well, because what it sounds like on the mic is that I was the CEO of this community, and Walt was making content for this community, and Walt messaged his quote-unquote volunteer boss and was like, hey, let's get on the mic. Yeah. Walt and I were really good friends. We went through all of COVID together, and we were really, really tight, and we knew that we had these conversations anyway. I was coming around to Walt's house, and we were sitting down and talking about the new set or, new deck ideas that we had. So, yeah, when I got this message, I was like, you know what? Sure, let's have a crack at this. Let's get together, just see what happens. Yeah. And then take it from there.
Yeah. And look, prior to episode 1, I had this big brainstorm and this kind of soul-searching moment because Know Thine Enemy wasn't exciting me anymore and I didn't feel this draw towards it. And I was like, okay, it seems like the content that really works, when people post it out there, it's because people have a skill set and they're leaning into it. You know what I mean? So Command Zone, for instance, so much of their popularity comes back to game nights. And if you look at the two of them, Josh and Jimmy, who started Command Zone, Josh was a professional video editor in Hollywood. He was making Hollywood trailers. He is that level of skill there. Jimmy's a professional actor. They had combined a skill for hosting and a skill for video that was their drawing card. And they were like, what was the thing we can make that will use this skill set? And game nights is the perfect example.
And also,
of that.
We'll go into this later, but professional contacts for them is a huge thing. They just
absolutely.
had anyone and everyone that they wanted to do. So yeah, when we did this, when Walt had this soul searching moment, it was okay, well, what is it that Walt has, and what is it that James has that we can go, right, times that by 50.
Yeah. How can we amp it up?
Yeah.
And look, we knew immediately, we're not professional players.
No.
We didn't want to seem like we were coming from a place of massive authority, we know so much about this game. And
I have been in one CDH final, and I will say that is my level of professionalism. And it was a community ran thing. I did well. It was a big pool of players. It was 47 players. I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
But I'm not Brian Kibler.
No. And it is completely different if you're Sam Black and you're sitting down to record a podcast. You can just be okay, I need a topic. You don't need to be what's my area of expertise? It's just no, I'm Sam Black. I can talk about anything I want. I've just got to find out what the topic is.
Get Commanded would be so different if it was Reed Duke and Brian Kibler having a chat.
Completely different podcast would result from that. And so we're okay, what can we make that nobody else can? And obviously a lot of this was directed at me. And I was okay, well, look, I'm an actor and I'm a writer. I've studied those at uni. I've done a fair bit of those. I feel pretty confident in that skill set. And yeah, me and James are running this community group. We were pretty hefty contributors in that community group. There were other people involved, but we did a lot of the stuff, just me and you.
A lot of the legwork around getting it sponsored and getting it, accredited and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was sort of I feel we know enough to advise the people in the community. We know the people in the community well enough to be hey, here's how you could maybe make your games a bit better.
Yeah, keep in mind, it was 150 people at that point.
Yeah, so we were okay, we want to help these people, but also, we're not professionals. We don't want to seem really, didactic is the word that comes to mind here, preachy. We don't want to be we know all this, dude, exactly like this. And so... I'm sorry to reveal the curtain just for like 1 second, but we conceived of the Space Commanders as a way to have an external force that is directing players to have better games.
Actually, edit that out.
Edit that out.
What happened was we got a light that came through our window as we were thinking about this. And we got abducted.
Yes.
That's what happened. And we ended up on their ship and they were like, yo, we have this idea. That's how they talk, right? Yo, we have this idea where we give you a topic. Yo, we're the Space Commanders. They twisted their cap backwards and everything. That's exactly what happened.
Sorry. I can't believe I forgot that. That's so rude of me.
In fairness, they did inject us with like memory diluting serums and stuff.
Look, we're still a bit messed up. Every now and then we go, otherwise we're fine.
Bleed from our eyes.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. You know how it is. You've been there. No, you haven't. We've been there. You haven't been there. Anyway, look, the great thing about the Space Commanders is that they are external to us. So, you know, they can direct this community that we're a part of in a way that doesn't feel like me and James preaching. You know, it's not us being like, hey, you got to do this. It's like, no, the Space Commanders are telling you that. And then we've got to interpret it and help you to digest the message of what they're saying.
I mean, the whole kind of angle of we're learning with you is what we really wanted. And the Space Commanders were a very good, like, what do you call it? Like a kind of base for that. Because we could springboard off them and we could disconnect ourselves from them. So any advice that we give is from us.
Yeah.
But it's because we had to figure it out with ourselves. And look, there are so many commands that we get that we're like, actually, we need to do some research on this. Like, we actually need to dig quite deep into the internet and like other people's podcasts to find out what we actually think on this topic.
Yeah, and that a lot of the early stuff especially was very based on like other people's content and us being like, okay, what's the way that we can convey these things that we know will improve Commander and improve the games that we have
to our
audience. Like we started with this core audience of Magic players. We were like, how can we help these specific people? Which I would say, this is in the script, but this is also a really good tip for when you're starting out any piece of content is go literally picture exactly who your audience is.
Yeah.
And go, okay, what is it I want to tell that person? Picture them in front of you and go like, okay, what am I saying to you directly?
We still write like this. Like when we're writing episodes, we still, you know, and this is why we're doing that poll that we're talking about is we want to know who you are so we can create the content for you.
Yeah. And look, the sort of structure of Get Commanded, the early episodes, was also based around this fact that I was like, okay, I can do silly acting. I know that James has an experience performing, is very willing to be silly on recording.
You know, a lot of humility.
Yeah. So, you know, there's some parts of the podcast that you listen to today that won't be in the early episodes that you listen to. You know what is there? The skits. Yep. In episode 1, there is a skit because we were like, we want a silly like way to bring everybody in and something we can entertain people with.
The skit verse has now got a lot of lore.
It's gotten a lot more complex, but it goes back all the way to episode 1. And I would say as well that the narrative of the Space Commanders is also a great way to be creative within, right? Like we sort of created this structure that lets us, you know, we can have conversations with this external force and we can have banter with this external force and kind of poke fun at and hint at lore. Like there's so much that opens up because of this thing that we came
And this was something that, you know, like I have a lot of experience. You know, I'm a business student, so one of my big things was marketing. So when we kind of thought about our brand, and this is a big part, and this is a big tip, is you really have to be solid on your brand. You have to like find a thing and you stick to it because you don't want to confuse your audience. And like the Get Commanded brand will stay the same for another, I'm going to say 3 years before we even consider shifting the brand in any way.
Yeah.
Like the brand has to be solid. And when we found out that it was going to be, okay, this goofy kind of sci-fi silly thing, we were like, okay, everything about the brand, including the logo, the design of the artwork, even stuff like our Discord server, how we post our episodes, what kind of thumbnails we do.
Yeah.
It all has to support this brand of... Effectively, the brand is Walt and I. When we landed on it, that was like, okay, this is our brand. It's silly. It's funny.
It's us and it's the Space Commanders. It's the relationship between the two. Yeah, absolutely. But to rewind slightly back to episode 1. So Get Commanded was the name that was come up with, obviously, as a way of, again, it was like
you're getting commanded.
You're getting commanded. Yeah. That was the thing. It's directed at you. You're going to receive this command.
Yep.
So, I threw together a script for episode 1. It is extremely sparse. I might post it up on Patreon. That might be a cool thing, actually. If you want to see how sparse that plan used to be, our scripts are a lot more in-depth now than they were back then.
Oh, you should see the philosophy of Color
One. Oh, yeah. They are
effectively
beefy.
an essay.
Yeah, 100%. But literally, I was like, okay, I've got this script. James, come over. We'll hit record. If we don't like it, we will never post it. There's no expectations whatsoever. Let's just see how it goes. And we had just the best time. I vividly remember hitting stop on the record, and we just looked at each other and we were just like, that was great.
That worked. Whatever that was, it worked.
We just had the best time. We had a big hug. We were like, oh my God, this is a fun thing we can do.
Oh man, we should have taken a photo. That would have been the prime opportunity to take a photo.
You just don't know when you're starting out with things where you might go with them, obviously. But yeah, we just had the best time. So I think that the next tip I want to give is... Look, you can post content on your own. I'm not going to deny that at all. But you need to find collaborators who support your skills.
Yes. 10,000% support this. Because, when Walt was doing Know Thine Enemy, it was very solo. And I think you burnt out from it very quickly.
I did.
And when I came on board, I wrote episode 2. Immediately. Episode 2 was, I believe, a politics episode, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Communicating was the name of that one. Yeah,
so, Walt wrote episode 1. And then immediately after I was like, no, I'm in. I'm doing this. Walt was like... I have a support now. It's not just I have a guest that's on frequently.
No, it's like a collaborative thing that we were doing. Yeah.
And not only just if it's you want to do a podcast or a, game show, film game content.
Yeah.
That's great. But also the people around you that support you, you'll hear this expression all the time. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not even that. It's not what you know, it's not who you know. It's what they've got and when you can borrow it. There are so many amazing people out there that have really great skills that are probably sat right next to you. For example,
absolutely.
If you know someone that has a really amazing Instagram, their photos are always on point, ask them, hey, have you ever done any Photoshop stuff or that kind of stuff? And they go, yeah, actually, in my free time I do all this kind of stuff. Would you mind editing a thumbnail for me just so you could see how it goes?
Or show me how to do it. Super early on. In fact, the first episode of the podcast is actually edited by Cooper, but I looked over his shoulder when he edited it because he had done a marketing degree and he'd done a couple of voiceover ad kind of things for his mates and just learned a bit about how to edit audio basically and compression and normalization and bass boosting and all this sort of stuff. And I just looked over his shoulder while he edited the first episode. I think he maybe edited one more and I've edited every single episode since then. And the editing process has not changed very much. I've learnt more about the different settings and how you tweak them and stuff. But yeah, literally just knowing Cooper, and I was just like, hey, do you know how to edit audio? He was like, yeah, I do. That's where I started out, and so much of the skills that I have, I owe to Cooper back then.
Yeah. And your LGS, I'm not kidding, your LGS is going to be full of creative people. There are people that will do art commissions and stuff. There will be people that are, for example, our theme song that you hear at the start of every episode, we got approached. I mean, this is really lucky. One of our great friends, Jay, in the game store approached us and said, hey, I've got, I really like your podcast, but it could use an intro.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put something together for you? And we were like,
absolutely, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. There was so much talent within just our LGS, and there will be in your LGS
and that's
as well.
Our LGS in Australia, miles away from anything.
Yeah. There will be people that you know. And look, even if it's you've got an uncle who shoots wedding photography.
Yeah.
Or takes wedding videos, he'll still know how to edit video.
He probably has application recommendations that you can use. Or maybe he has an account that he can lend you for an application.
He might have a bloody Adobe Creative Cloud or whatever
Final Cut Pro or whatever it is. Yeah,
something really fancy. So there are people out there who can help you. And also, I will straight up say, if you need pointers, we are happy to help at any time.
I mean, look, we're also content creators, if you haven't already realized. And we also want people to collaborate with. This is something that this year, really, Walt and I are really looking at trying to connect more with content creators and support each other. There's a expression, and this is where my business brain comes in. There's an expression called all rising waters rise all boats, or rising waters rises all boats.
Yeah, I've heard this before.
So effectively, if everyone's in a hard situation and those water levels are rising, all the boats will rise together because they're in the same water and they can support each other.
Yeah.
So if you want help, ask us if you want to come on our stream because you're a new content creator.
Yeah.
Let us know.
100%. Like, we don't know heaps, but the stuff we know might be useful to you. I had someone in my improv class just the other day be like, hey, I kind of want to start a podcast. I don't really know where to start. And I sent back the longest message. It was like so long in WhatsApp that you had to hit the read more.
See more, yeah.
Because it's obviously we're really passionate about it, and other people making stuff, like, it doesn't affect us except that it makes us excited.
Yeah.
So like we want to help.
I guess that's like, I mean, look, the first episodes of the podcast were like, kind of, we were doing it fortnightly at the time. Mm-hmm. That was what we tried to do. We were doing one every 2 weeks, and we were just throwing topics at a wall and just trying different things. Like, the first episode we recorded was in a different room. The second episode was like in a different room to that, was using a different microphone. Yeah. It was like we just tried different stuff. So I guess the third tip that we want to give you is just start. Yeah. Like, genuinely, if you are wanting to make content and to, do gameplay series, you have a phone. Yeah. Start. You film that.
You just have to start. Like, there are things, a lot of people imagine that they can sort of master everything before they put out their first thing. It just doesn't work like that. No. And also, like, nobody's like going viral with their first video or whatever. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen. Like, it happens to people who are benefits of this weird thing you might have heard of before, nepotism. Nepotism means that people can go viral like right out the gate. But otherwise, you just got to start posting stuff, and you will learn stuff like naturally over time. Every time I edited a podcast episode, I would just like try something and be like, oh, that actually sounds slightly better than what I did last time.
Please go back and listen to our early episodes.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And how bad they are. Yeah. And like, the scripts, like, I remember episode 5, I think, was called like In Response. Yeah. That was the first time we were like, okay, there is a limit to how long a script can be.
Yes.
Like,
that was one of my scripts, I think.
Look, I get it. Like, we wanted to give you everything you could possibly ever need about responding, but like that topic was massive, and that podcast episode ended up being, well, relatively speaking, really long. Yeah. At the time, our episodes were about 40 minutes long. I know that they can go kind of long now, but yes, like, we just had to start, and it was in the process of making the episodes, putting them together, trying new topics, editing, like every single thing that we did, every single time we did it, we got slightly better at it. And the only way you can start that process is by just starting. You just have to start making something.
Hit record.
Yep, you got to do it. Speaking of, it has been a while.
It's shocking. We're talking about ourselves this time.
I reckon it might be time for a thrifty interlude. So we've got lots left to talk about, including where we've gone since the first episode and how we improved since there. But before
more
then,
tips, of course.
Yeah, of course. We're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I'll be performing a monologue. And this week, it's the Cowled Merchant with some new wares. James, you want to read the card that we're featuring this week?
I sure would. People aren't playing this card enough. No. I've started slotting it into so many more decks.
It's so strong.
It's actually CDH playable as well. It's Commune with Lava. For X red and a red, you get an instant that says exile the top X cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards.
Ever wanted no hands? Riding around the neighborhood on your bicycle as your parents, friends, and former school teachers marvel at how cool you are? No hands, Mum! No hands! Forever! Well, get ready to feel the burn. You can talk with lava, if you touch it first. Or so I hear, though I can't say I heard it from the lava because it's cool, but not that cool, and not cool at all. It's hot! The lava may even grant you some special powers for a limited time only, so get in quick! No, don't get in the lava, it's an expression! Be a hot little man, and not in that way that usually gets you called a twink! Get budgeted!
The Cowled Merchant's aware of twinks. That's interesting.
The thrifty expanded universe is growing by the day.
And it now includes twinks.
It includes twinks.
Realistically, it should have always included twinks. It's the Cowled Merchant.
Whoa, big words.
I envision the Cowled Merchant as a twink.
All right, I respect it. If you enjoyed that, text posts are released every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server. That's something we talked about earlier. In the Thrifty Thursdays channel.
Yeah, every single week, and has been forever.
Forever.
Well, 2021 or whenever we started it.
As discussed. And speaking of, so we basically run through how Get Commanded started.
The origin story.
Yes.
The Batman's parents killed in an alleyway kind of vibes.
The equivalent of that. No deaths to parents, thankfully, that we know of. Yeah. Anyway... The next sort of milestone for us to talk about it's kind of a weird one, but episode 12, we kind of considered this at the time. We called this the start of season 2. So basically the really short story is that we recorded episodes 1 through 11 pretty much like, they were fortnightly, but we didn't have any breaks. Like for 11 fortnights, an episode came out every time. Yeah. And so then, we had a little pause. I can't remember what time of year it was. Maybe it was around Christmas.
I think it was.
I think it might have been.
Just over the Christmas break. I think because we kind of reunited and we had like a chat at the game store, didn't we? We sat down together and you had like a list of things that you were pondering and things that you wanted to change.
Yeah.
But, I had my own kind of ideas and we just reconnected.
Yeah. So look, I think the fourth tip that we want to give here for the content creators or the future content creators out there is to continuously improve on anything that you can. So just to give you a bit of an insight onto some of the things that we looked at after episode 11 and we're like, what can we do to reach more people? And at this point, I think we'd had one person message us who was not part of our community and was like, hey, I really enjoy the podcast. Or
Keep in mind, we were only distributing on SoundCloud at this point.
We were. It was just SoundCloud
we did 11
only.
Episodes just on SoundCloud.
And YouTube as well.
Yes, we were on YouTube back then as well.
But literally that's all we were posting. And somehow we were still reaching people. So we were kind of like, okay, we know that there's a community of people that we're making this for, but also there's a much larger community of Commander players out there. And like, we could make a show for them as well.
Yes. If anything, we got really excited by that prospect.
Yeah.
We kind of like, well, I remember when we got that first message from someone we had never met before, we were like, oh, people have found us. Like someone has found us at least.
Yeah. So like it's possible for people to just find this in their stumbles. They'll stumble upon it while they're looking out there.
So naturally now we were like, okay, well now we have a different audience. We have, because we were, like we said, making this show exclusively for our play group effectively in this community that was tight. So we had a couple of things that in the first 11 episodes that we were doing that were very geared towards that audience.
So a really obvious example is before we used to planeswalk at the end of episodes, we actually used to have play of the week where we would talk about a cool moment that happened in one of our games. And it was a cool like little addition, but fun. The problem was, and it sort of forms part of another thing we did, which is that we started to try and rein in how often we were referring to members of our play group as though everyone knew them already. And Play of the Week was a big culprit of this, right? It was like, oh, remember the other day when Nick did this in a game? And it's like, if you were at our Tuesday LGS Commander Night, you probably would know what we were talking about.
Because it was probably a moment where everyone stood up and went, oh!
Yeah, oh my God, look at that. And like someone turned around and was like, hey, have you seen this?
Yeah.
But everybody
There's like
else...
9 million Scoot Swarms over here.
And it was very special if your name came up. Like if you were in that game and someone was like, oh, I remember this game with Nick and with Alfred the other day, and Alfred goes, oh my God, I can't believe I've been mentioned on the podcast before.
By the way, Alfred, we apologize for making fun of you like this on the podcast. Please don't add us.
Yeah.
You're definitely a real human.
Look, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to care for Master Wayne after his parents died. Anyway, we were referring to people as though everyone knew them, and we sort of realized, like, if you were new to this, it would sort of feel a bit alienating. It'd be like, oh, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
And so we started giving more context when we talked about people who were not me and James, basically.
Yeah. And, like, we kind of... We've still tried to create a few people on the Get Commander show as like recurring characters, I guess.
Yeah.
That like come up, like Stubbsy Cooper. He's our one and only guest on this podcast. We've referred to him a lot.
Yeah.
Even Abe as the Origins. Yeah. Even like Wizard Down Under is like, someone that we play with a lot is now a patron that, we talk about as almost a character on the show.
But like even what you just saying, like Wizard Down Under, who is a patron of the show, like that was not what we were doing. We were going like, oh, and of course you all know Nick.
Yeah,
that was what
the
we
language
were saying.
shifted a lot, and I think that we had to start going. Okay, well, we're now going to assume that our audience is other people.
Yeah, and also that those other people might be a lot newer to Commander than some of the people that we know. So we started like trying to expand a lot of the slang words that we used. So we would just throw the words aristocrat and mill and stuff out there. And I know that some of you still struggle with this, even still to this
had
day.
A few of the things in the poll have said more explanation.
More explanation of the slang, and I get
you.
it. There's so much shorthand in Magic. Like even the word ETB. I remember someone messaged me and was like, "What's an ETB?" And I was like, "Oh my god, of course!"
It's about to become enters
I
with
know.
Thunder Junction.
Oh god, we're still going to be saying ETB. How many people still say CMC instead of mana
I
value?
do.
That's
I
still a thing. But yes, we started trying to improve at that around episode 12. Obviously, Jay's opening theme comes back around here.
We also commissioned my partner for actual artwork and branding. I sat down and basically had a chat with my partner, and my partner's an incredible... It wasn't like my partner just picked up a pen and was like, I'll give this a crack.
Yeah.
They've been doing artwork for a long time. And I said, look, Walt and I want to make our season 2, episode 12 and onwards, professional, and I think a good brand will do that. So, thinking back to what I was saying before about our brand, I basically gave that brand description to Theo, and Theo ran with it, and now we have all of these amazing assets. We've got our like Space Commander face icon that we use as our
logo in the corner of the thumbnails on the stream, YouTube videos.
We've got like our logo that I'm now using our logo as a watermark on invoices that I send across to
100%.
our sponsors and stuff like that.
The comic art obviously is amazing. That's the little album art that you see when you look at the show.
That was, by the way, Theo came to us with that as a concept quote.
Oh, God.
And we were like, no way.
It's done, Theo.
That's done. That's the album artwork. Can you make that? Because originally they did it as like a comic book.
Which we still have.
We still have.
That might be the banner that we eventually have like behind us at events and stuff. We'll probably get Theo to adapt it a bit.
Or potentially card sleeves.
Ooh,
maybe.
Actually, that'd be the perfect size for card sleeves. But yes, they cropped it down a little bit. I'd move some assets around to make it into the square that you see on your screen.
But yeah, we're like, okay, let's hit this episode 12 with like a big bang. So we got the music, we got the artwork. And that was kind of like the beginning of Get Commanded being Get Commanded for everyone and not Walt and James doing something silly for a community group.
Yeah. And also, like, we realized that we sort of were forming a kind of identity as our own thing. Like, the super early episodes kind of feel like it's just two guys in a room. But we're sort of like, oh no, we kind of have a slant that we approach things through. So a word that me and James sometimes use is like, we'll have an idea that for a transmission that we hope the Space Commanders give us. And... or we're reading the inbox and we're scanning through their transmissions. But we're trying to find the way to decode it, and we go, okay, what's the Get Commanded way? Like, what's the Get Commanded slant here? And that's like a shorthand for the way of describing things for players having better games, to improve yourself as a person.
What's the lesson?
The lesson, the philosophy behind it. Like, these are the things that we know people associate with Get Commanded and why you come back to us.
Let's be honest, like, let's talk about this episode as an example.
Yeah.
This episode, a few people have asked us to like tell our story and all this kind of stuff. And we were like, okay, but what's our Get Commanded slant?
Yeah.
Let's give some tips and tricks on content creation. That was our Get Commanded slant.
So that's the Get Commanded way into everything. And like another thing we started doing around episode 12 was that we referred to the Space Commanders a lot more. We go like, oh, remember when the Space Commanders said this? Or
in
like
the specific words that they said.
Yeah. And we'd say like, the transmission. And like, we just wanted to lean more into the flavor of Get Commanded, I guess. Like there is an aesthetic that came a lot from Theo, to be honest.
Yeah.
That comic art like really inspired us and was like, okay, like the really simple things that we feel like we're doing are actually conjuring up an imagined world that is quite expansive and space and comic booky.
I can't wait till the first Get Commanded comic book. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh man,
but
Theo's got to do it.
Yeah, and I think that once we like hit the ground running with all of this, we really were like, okay, let's tighten up the process of everything. We went on episode, I think we did it for the deck building series. We went, okay, let's try and do these episodes weekly.
Yeah.
And we haven't missed a week since then.
No, I think
that was episode 14.
We had 1 week off December last year.
Christmas, that was it.
But literally since episode 14, aside from that week, there has been a Get Commanded episode every single Friday.
Yep.
Since then. The funny story behind that is that we recorded the deck building episode in, I think, one session, or maybe it was two.
No, we did it in 2 sessions.
That's right, because we were going to make it one episode. It's funny for those of you who are familiar with these episodes, because it's like 6 hours of content.
Yeah.
We recorded one episode, what we thought was one episode, and it took like 4 hours, and we were like, I think this is too long. Let's stop recording now. We recorded again what was part 3, and we split the first recording into part 1 and part 2. And yeah, we literally were like, okay, I guess we've got 3 episodes in the tank. Let's just schedule them up 3 in a row.
Was it the deck building ones where you corrupted one of the files, or was that a Q&A? Was that deck building?
Oh, that might have been.
Because there was,
I think it was part 3.
I think it was part 3 of deck building. If you go back and listen to that was the second time we recorded it, because Walt corrupted one of the files.
I think it's part 3.
It's like a 2-hour episode.
16. I think you're right. Okay, the changes in process that have come since then is that I don't ever mess around with the Audacity file folder. Basically, when you make an audio file in Audacity, it creates a folder called, like, you know, if I have the episode file and it's called episode 80, GCP episode 80, which is how I name them, it'll say GCP episode 80 data, and there's a folder that's associated with that in Audacity.
Don't touch that
Don't
data.
fucking touch that folder.
Don't touch it.
And the other thing I do is, as soon as we finish recording, James can attest to this, every single time I export the raw audio to just a WAV file, just a blank audio file, and just have that in the tank. And so even if I completely obliterate the Audacity file in some way and make it blank like I did that time, I can at least just export that existing audio back in, and it won't be exactly the same. It'll be very close enough that I can make something work. God, thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, that was it. But that shows that's like a real honest, like, we stuff things up. Like, you know, like, this is the only reason that we get to this point is because we tighten the screws. Like, you know, we've, you know, changed things about, like, the processing of the audio files is one, but even the scripts, like, you know, we don't have a, like, word for word script. Like, I'm not reading these words off a page.
No,
but, like,
we never do.
The way,
except maybe philosophy of is a slightly more tightly scripted. Yeah,
so it's more tight. Like, I write effectively an essay for those episodes,
and then we have talking points,
break it down from that. Yeah,
but in general we don't read off page, very, very rarely.
Yeah, and, like, you know, the tightening those scripts up and giving us, like, a really solid foundation to work from means that the show runs better.
Yeah,
and, like, even stuff like, you know, working with Palms Off Gaming is getting better because I message them more frequently and all this kind of stuff. Like, there's just things that over time you learn, you make a mistake, you learn from it, and you get better at it.
Well, and funnily enough, going back to that deck building guide episode, I think that episode is maybe the reason that we have the thrifty interlude now, because we realized that sometimes we were sitting down with scripts that we thought were going to take 2 hours to record, and the recording sessions were going for 3 to 4 hours. For those early long episodes, we had no breaks.
Yeah.
We never used to take a break in the recording.
And I'll point out something right now. It is about, midday in Australia, and the room that we are sitting in is already reaching nearly 30 degrees.
Yeah, it is hot in here. We need, like, time to go and drink water and have a little walk around. And the thrifty interlude is a very, very fun little break to have in the middle, but that is also partly there so that we have a opportunity to regroup, reset a little bit before we record, because we record all of our episodes in 2 goes. There are no other takes really, except for the beginning, and then the interlude and the second half.
Yep. For our Patreons, I'm curious, this is something we've been pondering. Would you like an unedited raw recording of the 2 halves of the episodes?
It's not a lot longer, I'm not going to lie.
It's not too much longer.
But there's a little bit of me and James just goofing around at the start and at the end.
Which is why you listen, right?
Yeah. The main reason. And then I think the one last thing I would say we started to look at around episode 12, maybe it was slightly later than this, was we were challenged by a few different people to be more opinionated. People said,
I remember that.
You and James just agree all the time, and that's fine, but also there's no way you all agree on all of those things.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the origin of some of the space battle episodes.
Yeah.
They're sparsely released, but those episodes were there to basically prove that Walt and I have different opinions.
Yeah.
And to kind of allow Walt and I to go toe to toe and kind of share and fight on stuff.
And really elaborate on our positions. Because, yes, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes on the podcast, someone will say something and some other person will go, I'm not sure
if I agree with that.
Yeah, but the space battle is an opportunity to be like, okay, here's exactly why.
This is why you're an idiot.
Yes. A few other small things that we've learned over time, and these are more of the practical tips. Scryfall has this amazing button that says PNG download on it.
Hit that button. Do not copy. Don't right click and copy from the image that's on the webpage.
No, don't go to Google Images. Don't try to crop cards out of stuff. You can go to Scryfall, go PNG download. It downloads a perfect cropped image of the card in super high def. That's what I use for all of our thumbnails, every Thrifty Thursdays, everything. It's all you need. Seriously.
It's so for thumbnails for YouTube videos.
Yeah, it's a dream. It's an
so
absolute dream.
Easier.
This is from me as the audio editor. For a long time, I was looking at the actual waveform in the episode to edit by. Don't do that. Use your ears.
Yep.
For a long time, maybe this is only noticeable to me because I edit it and then listen to it and try and find notes for myself and stuff, but I was listening back and going, I feel like I'm slightly quieter than James for a long time.
I have a very loud voice.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It's just your voice carries through the mic a lot more.
Yeah.
So even though the two graphs might look the same, my voice doesn't carry through the mic the way that yours does. So I literally don't look at the graphs at all anymore. I just listen and keep on turning myself up until I think me and James are the same volume.
One from me, I guess, from the one that handles the more business side of things. A little tip just to get involved with brands and stuff like that. Just message them. Straight up, on Instagram, message them. We're currently having a chat with Infinitokens. Not sure if anything will happen, but we're talking to each other now. Conversations are happening. And even we were messaging the other day, Infinitokens retweeted my photo.
Your replicated ring,
yes.
Right? So replicating ring's that card from Kaldheim. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a time counter. Is it a time counter? Or it might be
Ice
an
counter.
You put some sort of counter on it.
And when it has 8, you basically remove them all and you make 8 token copies called replicated ring.
So those ones don't copy themselves in another 8 upkeeps. But
you make 8 mana rocks.
And also notably, we discovered you don't sacrifice the original. So it can continue to accrue counters. Anyway, so he had 8 replicated rings.
I finally did it. I tweeted it out.
Used an Infinity token to represent every single one of them. And yes, Infinity tokens reposted it.
and that just got us talking.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things that if you're nervous about approaching brands, remember that the brand is not the person you're going to be talking with. When you approach, Channel Fireball, I don't know, in the future, maybe we will. But you're not talking to the logo with that fireball mouth.
No.
You're talking to a guy in their marketing team.
Yeah.
And they'll just be yeah, sure. What is your content about? What can we work with you on? And
start a conversation, and there's no harm in it, and it might take a while, but you might come back to it and things have progressed because you've started the conversation.
That's basically what's happening with a lot of stuff now. There's a couple of brands that we were talking to at the end of last year, which will only really come to fruition middle of this year.
Yeah.
And
but the sooner you start the conversation, the sooner that can happen.
Exactly.
For sure. In terms of thumbnails, when I'm putting these together, so you obviously do the ones for the gameplay episodes.
Yes.
But I do the ones that sort of get posted with the episodes when they get posted on the Discord and Twitter, Instagram, that kind of thing. Make everything way bigger than you think you'll need to. And the way you can check this is when you finish exporting it out of whatever editing program you use, shrink it down, have a little window with it open and make it literally the size of a phone screen on your computer. And just see how legible everything is, because you'll find a lot of the time that you look at the text and you go, that's actually not super legible, and I could put a bigger border around that. And then you look at the cards and you go, those cards could be bigger, and the faces could be bigger. And actually, speaking of faces, everybody loves faces. The reason that the meme of the YouTube thumbnail is the shocked face is because it works.
Yeah.
We see a face that's expressing something and we go, why are they expressing that for? And me and James do lots of facial expressions.
We're due for another photo shoot for our thumbnails. My hairstyle's changed. I don't have a man bun anymore.
No, your hair looks very different.
My hair has changed. So we're due for one. Maybe we do a behind the scenes on that photo shoot. We'll just do a quick little video on Patreon.
It's a pretty simple thing. We go into a room, there's a green screen, and then my partner just takes a million photos of us with tea cups and cards, and it's
a fun time. It's a lot of time.
And then obviously another small improvement improvement. This is probably the most recent and noticeable one, is that I composed the sound pieces that accompany the transmission when we go to space to hear from the space commanders, and also the music that plays at the end of every episode. So they're each of them is a small thing that you're doing, like the PNG that you're downloading from Scryfall, the thumbnail you're making, or the music that you put in, and the theme song, and the art, and like all this is small, but the cumulative effect is that something can look like it's a really coherent and professional thing.
Yeah, and it's like you don't have to start with all of this. Like if you go back and listen to our early episodes, the Space Commanders sound an awful lot like Walt. Like a lot. They sound very similar. They sound so similar before they got their voice coders. Seriously, go back, have a listen.
Don't do it.
It's so funny.
Yes.
It's so funny.
But I forgot about that.
We're keeping those uploaded as proof that this is a journey.
You can go back and you can listen to those episodes and you can really understand. Like, there's a lot of things me and James have worked on. And the last thing I think the Space Commanders wanted us to talk about was spending money.
Oh, yeah. This is something that, like, we started out being like, nah, we're not doing any of this. And then we're like, hang on. There are things that if we make a little investment here, a little investment there, we can really take it to a different level.
Yeah. But look, the funny thing is, and I think the tip I want to give here is only spend money when you have to. Yep. And I want to run through like how much of what we do is still costs us no money at all. Mm-hmm. So basically the first thing we really properly spent money on was admittedly Captivate, which is the podcast hosting platform we use. This is how you get your podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts.
Yeah, so you don't go to Spotify, you don't go to Apple, you go to a center point that distributes you across all the platforms.
So you do have to apply to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all these different places once to get them on there. But to be honest, it's only really those three: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, because Apple Podcasts...
Google Podcasts doesn't even exist anymore.
No, it's gonna be part of YouTube
podcast,
Music. Yeah. But the Apple Podcasts is the directory that almost every other podcast service draws from. So once you're on there, you're basically set.
Yeah.
But yes, we do pay for that. It's a yearly subscription, and it's something we have to do. But like, aside from that, you are so lucky to live in the time that you do, and we are so lucky to live in the time that we do in terms of how accessible it is to be a content creator. We used a $50 microphone for the first like 50 episodes of this podcast.
It was just the microphone you had.
It was just one I had bought for like some uni work a little while back. It's not particularly good, but it was fine. Like nobody ever was like, your audio is terrible. Yep. Like no one ever said anything like that.
I do remember buying these microphones that we're on now though, and that was like
that was a good day. But like, I still edit my episodes. I talked about before with using Audacity. Audacity is completely free. I used to edit our video, the YouTube videos on DaVinci Resolve. That's pretty much all free. There's a couple of filters you have to pay for. You use
I use CapCut now. Yeah, CapCut is kind of like a very industry standard for content creators now, specifically for vertical video. There are a lot of like free effects, like effects everywhere that you can just like throw on different things. Yeah. They also, CapCut's really great. It does automatic transcripts. So it will automatically read transcripts and it will bring out a transcript for you. So when you want to do, so you're like that TikTok that I did of one of our highlights of the streams. Yeah. I got most of that from AI captured like voice recognition.
And then you just had to edit it to match it up or whatever. That's so good.
Really, really cool.
Yeah.
And also free.
Yes, free.
You can also get it on the wild thing. CapCut has an app for your phone. You can
just edit an entire TikTok video
on your phone.
Yeah, so cool. We stream using OBS and Stream Elements. Both of those are completely free. Even the music that we play in the background, admittedly, the Dante Fierro music is courtesy of Dante Fierro. That stuff is not in the public domain, so you can't use that for free unless you ask him first, like I did.
Pretty please.
Yes, pretty please. It's a brother of mine. But like all the other music you hear on our stream, that is literally, if you go on YouTube and you go like royalty-free lo-fi music,
there's like 8-hour videos where you can just chuck that on in the background.
Straight up, all that is being used. The thumbnails that I make, I use a program called, I can't believe they're still called this, GIMP.
No way.
They're called GIMP. It's an acronym. It's short for like GNU Image Manipulation Program, but I'm like, why that acronym, bro?
That's silly.
You could have used any other letters besides those. That is completely free. It's like a Photoshop knockoff. It doesn't look anything like Photoshop. It takes you a while to get your head around, but like the power of the program is similar to Photoshop.
Yeah.
And it's completely free.
And I guess now it's like, okay, well, what else are we spending money on? Like all the Patreon stuff. And you can see on our Patreon what we're putting the money towards.
Yeah. Yeah.
We bought our brand new microphones from our Patreon money.
Yep.
When we get money from sponsors, we either put that into a giveaway where we can buy stuff to promote ourselves and try and get ourselves in front of more people, or we put it towards things like, helping us get to conventions or something like that. But the other thing that we're now looking at is, okay, well, what's next? And conversations like merchandise is a conversation. Stuff like a banner that we can take with us to conventions.
The events that we go to, and then have it behind us, so you know where Get Commanded is because you can see the big comic art on the wall. And
also, like, if we're running the commander space, like, having that as like an icon, it's important. So we basically say only spend money on the things that you need, firstly, like really need, and like there are so many things that you do not need, like fancy $300 microphones. You do not need at the start, like at all.
And look, even these microphones that we bought, we ended up going for basically like the smallest amount we could pay for a microphone that would still sound really great. So like there are cheaper microphones than the ones that we use. For what it's worth, we're using the Rode Procasters, plugging them into a Scarlett 2i2 interface, for those of you who are audio nerds, I guess.
Walt did a lot of the research on the microphones, if you can't tell.
I did. But like these are basically, in Australia, at least because Rode is an Australian company, these are slightly cheaper here. This is basically as cheap as you can pay for a mic that is a broadcast microphone, makes a voice sound really rich, and is a dynamic microphone, which means it basically is very good at capturing noise immediately in front of it.
I'll give a great example. Right now I'm talking into the mic, and if I move slightly to the left of the microphone, it will be a lot quieter, and if I start moving back, I'll get right again.
So this is really good because me and James are in the booth right now. The booth is my room, by the way.
It's your office.
We're a meter apart, so if we didn't have that, there'd be a lot of echo being captured between the two microphones. But yeah, we spent basically, like, there was a lot of microphones out there that cost a lot more money. Like the standard for podcasting is the Shure SM7B. That microphone costs like $600 a piece. In Australian dollars.
We need two of them.
So that would be like $1,200.
And it would ship from America as well. We'd have to get it shipped.
So like we like, these are great microphones, and we're obviously thrilled with them and thrilled that the patrons have managed to support us buying this. But like, we still were like, we don't want to bankrupt ourselves on this thing. Like, we want to take it seriously, but we're not just like throwing money away. And I guess the reason we've talked about so many things that are free is that like you can not spend money on all those things, so that when you spend the money, it's on the stuff that matters, like getting to the conventions, like for me and James, like the new microphones,
Captivate, even like distributing your podcast. This is stuff that's like, you want your podcast to be available on all platforms, pay for Captivate,
totally,
or like there's a million versions of it.
And by the way, like Palms Off Gaming, the initial sponsorship deal that we had with them was literally just them covering Captivate. That was the whole deal. We would chat them out every episode, like point them to the products. Eventually, they came out with the referral link that we have.
The affiliate
that wasn't
link.
even a thing initially. It was literally just like, if you guys can just cover this one hefty cost that we have, we'll shout you out every episode.
And Palms Off Gaming were like, that's kind of not a lot of money for us, so like, sure, we'll do that.
We probably sold ourselves a little bit short, but we love those guys at Palms Off, obviously.
We really do.
Look, I think the final thing, I guess, that I want to say is, like, you have to be prepared for the fact that you will be making content for like a small audience, or potentially nobody, for a long time. Like, we had a conversation around about a year in, and we were like, okay, like, if we were just making this podcast...
We called it out To Infinity and Beyond meeting. That was what we called it.
That was that's 6 months ago now. It's maybe like 18 months into doing it. We were like, okay, like, we need to plan ahead for all this stuff. And we were like, okay, how long would we be willing to make this with like the same size audience that we have right now? And we were like, 3 more years at least, And that
was like, we were saying, what is our audience? And we even undershot it to make ourselves, like, humble ourselves. And we were like, okay, let's say 20 people listen to the episode when it comes out on the daily, which, by the way, it's a lot higher than that now. A lot higher. Ridiculously higher than that, which is amazing. Thank you all so much for listening. But we were like, okay, if we do this with no audience, like, effectively just 20 people and people that we know from our local game store, how long are we willing to do this? All right, let's do it for that long, and then we'll revisit it. And it's already blowing up. So you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. It's wild. It's insane.
But the last tip, I think, is to straight up make content that makes you happy. Because then it won't really matter ultimately who listens. Because like we love obviously hearing from people. We love that we're having an effect on people's games. And we've seen the Rule Zero template that we put together being used in game stores and stuff.
Man, when someone sends us a photo of like a game store up in Brisbane and it's like, hey, this appeared at my local game store.
That is so cool. Like,
so
we are
cool.
absolutely so thrilled with that. But like ultimately me and James do this because we love meeting up every week and just like talking nonsense on a mic and writing episodes and lately streaming.
Yeah, what an awesome experience that's been.
It's been so cool.
We are so close to affiliate as well, by the way. You guys have like come out in force and given us those like follows and all that kind of stuff. I do want to shout out while we're talking about this. On the 22nd, we're going to be doing CDH gameplay on stream. On the 25th, we're doing casual gameplay. On the 31st, I'm going to play some Arena while Walt watches.
Yes.
On the 6th, more casual gameplay. And on the 12th, thanks to Good Games Australia, we're going to be streaming with the new Outlaws at Thunder Junction pre-constructed decks.
Yeah, there is lots more streaming to be had because we're having so much fun with it. Like, this is cool. The reason that we're doing it. So yeah, twitch.tv/getcommanded. But yes, we are doing the things that we really love. And to be honest, we're just so lucky that it's the stuff that you all want to listen to.
I have a bit of a life philosophy that is actually tattooed onto my ribs that my dad told me once. I remember I was in a motocross race. For those that don't know, I used to race motocross. I was having a terrible race, kept crashing, was really frustrated at myself, and my dad stood over my front wheel and stopped me and took my helmet off and said, "Are you having fun?" And I said, "No, I'm not having fun. This is really upsetting me. This is really hard." And he said, "Right, let's go home." And I went, "No. That's not... What are you doing?" He says, "All of this is not worth it unless you have a smile inside your helmet." And since he said that, I have always made sure to have a smile inside my helmet no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I remember telling Walt that ages ago, and we both basically agreed that that's what we'll do. As long as we have a smile inside our podcast booth, we'll keep doing this.
100%. Look, it's been a long journey. We've been making this podcast for you for almost 2 years now, and we're still having so much fun. We hope that laying out our story has inspired some of you out there to try your hand at making stuff, because all of us have unique skill sets, and there's someone out there looking for the exact thing that you know how to make. So, Space Commanders, command received. Woohoo! Nice.
That's our story, yo.
Yeah.
To the listeners... Do you think our story is interesting? And are you going to start making your own content?
Yeah.
Would you like to come on the Get Commanded stream with us? Like,
hype.
Hit us up.
Yeah, hit us up if you're going to make stuff. Absolutely. And of course, if you're interested in the future of Get Commanded, please fill out that giveaway poll that we have linked in the show notes. We just want to give away all that amazing product to you, of course. But obviously, we also just want to know what it is you love about us, what you are interested in seeing from us next, what you could do with less of. We want to hear absolutely everything from absolutely all of you. So please enter the giveaway. Even if you're not interested in the stuff, we just want to hear from you. Like, Chuck, do the whole poll just to fill out that last question with the Q&A bit. Like, we want to get your Q&A questions.
And all the giveaways, duh.
There's an enormous amount of stuff being given away.
And look, if you want to talk to us outside of that poll, you can get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, at Get Commanded on all those platforms. But we really would love to talk to you live in person on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/getcommanded.
Yeah.
You can watch all of those if I edit quick enough to get all of those videos. We're streaming so much. I'm like, there's a huge backlog of content that I need to get up onto YouTube. But YouTube is where you can watch those streams on demand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we would be lost without our patrons. Over on Patreon, that's the reason these mics sound so good. It's linked in the show notes. It's the best way to support the Get Commanded podcast directly. We'd like to thank our patrons Stella Tam, Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, and Dyer. And an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under, who support us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You're the best. And thank you to Palms Off Gaming for covering that Captivate cost for us and doing a lot more for us.
Yes.
Sponsor of our podcast pretty much since the beginning. Very, very close to.
They've stuck with us and we're so appreciative of it.
And I don't think we're moving anytime soon.
No, we love those guys.
Look, these guys create amazing gaming accessories, which are included in the giveaway in that poll. So if you want to check it out, you can go to palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded and you can get 10% off your purchase. And you also get to support us at the same time and get our journey ever going. And just continuing into the future. So palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded.
You got to do it. You gotta.
You must. That sounded very threatening. Have to. Go buy some sleeves.
When's the next? When the Space Commander is going to do a you have to buy merch command? Buy from Palms Off Gaming, and you'll be good or something. I don't know.
That they're not going to tell us that though. They're going to beam that into the listeners' audio devices
true.
directly.
Yeah. In 3, 2, no. That's not gonna happen.
Should we planeswalk? Should we get out of it? Okay.
Let's get outside of Commander.
Last week we did a pretty full-on one together, but what have you been doing that's fun in the past couple of weeks?
I went and saw Wicked.
Oh, the Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz musical.
I have seen this as well. It's a great show.
I'd never seen it before. Neither had my partner.
You're not a massive musicals person, though, are you? You're not
it's interesting. Like, I certainly wasn't for, like, all of my life growing up. It was funny going to uni and realizing that a lot of the experiences people had with theatre, like when they'd gone with their family and stuff,
were strictly musicals
because my family was the complete opposite, where my parents were making theatre shows at, like, small independent theatre venues.
That was theatre to you.
That was theatre to me. And so when people were like, oh, I love musicals, I was always like, what? Is that theatre? Does that count?
I remember when we met, I was hugely into musicals when we met, and you were like, it's not real theatre.
No, it's totally real theatre. It's just a different form. And look, I did study musical theatre at uni, and it was great. And it made me appreciate how much of musical theatre there is in, for example, some of the highest grossing films of the last 10 years, Disney films.
Yeah.
Pretty much every Disney princess style film, that's a musical, bro.
Yep. Wonka with Timothée Chalamet just came out. I didn't actually realize that was going to be a musical as well.
Yep.
It's a musical for it.
It's a huge, huge art form. And anyway, I hadn't seen Wicked before. I'd heard really great things. I'd obviously, as a person who had spent time in musical theatre people, had heard Defying Gravity about 6 trillion times in rehearsal rooms.
Yeah. It's
iconic. I get it.
It's an absolute. Also, if you're a musical theater nerd, anything that has a belt in it, like where you can properly
that's
belt,
the time to show off your
gravity. Like that's, if you can do that, oh my god, you will.
Yeah, those are the songs you're looking for. Are like your "I'm making it" song.
Yeah, I'm being hoisted up into the auditorium on a wire kind of deal.
It was really fun. It was really cool. I didn't know really anything about it going in, except I realized I knew that song, and I also knew,
related to Wizard of Oz.
Yes, I obviously knew that, and I also knew the song. I realized after it started playing, Popular, that popular song. I knew that one too.
Yeah.
I think probably again from my musical theatre nerd friends in uni, but it was just so fun. We sort of spent a fair bit of money on tickets, but that's musicals, right?
Yeah.
But we had a really great spot. We were sort of like in the stalls towards the back.
I saw your selfie. You were like in a.
It was a good spot. Look, as a person who works in a theatre, I kind of knew where I could strike a compromise between money and a good view, and I nailed it that time. So I felt good about that.
Job.
But yeah, like it was just like a really fun show. It didn't it wasn't going to change. It's not going to change my life, like the things that I learned in it or anything, but it was really entertaining. It was really fun. And like the spectacle of it when she like hoisted up on the wires.
Yeah, and she's holding the broom.
And they had like all these lights pointed at her from like 7 different locations. Yeah. Like, so she was like isolated in the air. There was like smoke in the air. It was like pretty spectacular.
I love that show. I specifically love it because one of my first ever performances on a stage was performing as the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, you told me before about this. Yeah.
It was great fun. I got to do a few roles during that theater run. I kind of obviously the Wizard of Oz, they usually have like the person in the real world also plays a character in Oz.
Yeah,
like
that's the double casting thing, right? Like all like the Scarecrow and the Tin Man are all like members of her family.
Yes, and like farmhands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I played the Professor Marvel, who's like the fortune teller in the real world, and the wizard.
Right.
And then on a couple of nights, it was like a 3-week run show, and then on a couple of nights I played the doorman at Oz, the one that goes, "The Merry Old Land of Oz."
Oh my god.
So I got to do that song on stage, which was very fun.
Love that.
Yeah, it's a good show.
It's a great little world. It's so camp and so fun.
Whimsical.
Definitely so whimsical. It's a whimsical musical.
Whimsical. That rhymed.
It's a whimsical.
You made that rhyme. That was good.
I'm a genius.
Just in time for the end of the episode.
That's all we have time for. We'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.